you.
Thank you. Sorry, I was having some issues. Para todos los que necesiten interpretación, estamos teniendo unas dificultades con el cuarto de interpretación. Vamos a seguir trabajando para poder arreglar esto, pero si requieren servicios de interpretación a español, por favor anuncien que los requieren a este momento. Pueden poner comentario en el chat si requieren interpretación. Okay, I don't think there's anyone.
Thank you, Topacio. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm glad that you are all here, and we'll be watching to see if anyone else joins us. My name is Rebecca Elfring Roberts. I'm the comptroller for the diocese, and I'll be leading our session tonight. But I want to invite the Reverend Sierra Reyes to open us in prayer.
The Lord be with you.
Also with you.
Let us pray. Loving and gracious God, we are grateful for this time to gather this evening as a Diocese of Chicago. We approach this very important topic with humility and ask for your wisdom and your guidance in managing our resources. We pray that you guide us, Lord. Guide us in using our resources wisely to honor you. Give us the clarity of mind and appropriate of skills to understand the financial issues that we will discuss. And grant us trust in one another and trust in you. And help us as we strive toward achieving common goals of justice, reaffirming love, and respecting the dignity of every human being. All the while giving praise to your name. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Well, again, welcome. I have the privilege of being here and getting to lead this session tonight. But I want to first say that this budget process this year really started with my colleagues, Keith Campert, our treasurer, and Crystal Plummer, our canon for networking, who were tasked with putting together a budget process that looked different this year than it has in the past, specifically trying to respond to the concerns from our diocesan council and our bishop and trustees, that in our process in previous years, we were bringing a budget to them that had been fully crafted and asking them to approve it without much opportunity for hearing the input that went in to building it and being able to respond. And so this year, they created a budget committee that met 5 times throughout the summer, starting in June through July and August, that led us to the meetings in September with diocesan council and with bishop and trustees, where the budget was officially approved. If this is maybe your first time, as a delegate to convention or really being interested in the budget, the way that the Diocese of Chicago works on the budget is that it is approved by those 2 committees or those 2 governing bodies, and then is brought to convention and presented there, but it has already been approved. And so the importance of that work over the summer, I really can't highlight enough. And so I want our time together tonight to be an opportunity to hear a bit about that process, possibly to hear from some folks who were involved, and to give you sort of the highlights of the budget for 2024, and then to provide some opportunity for people to give ask questions and give feedback if there's anything that has brought up for you. I hope that you have seen the materials that we've provided, both the budget as approved and the narrative budget, which has been out in the e-news for a couple weeks. Those are both really helpful documents. I will also note, if you haven't read through the reports, which I don't expect everyone to have, but this year we also did a report on the Common Mission Share, which was the first time that the Treasurer's Office has put that together. And I think it also helps to tell the story a bit. And so if you haven't taken a look at that, I would offer that for you as well. But so I will start with just a little more about that budget process to say that when we gathered the committee in the beginning of the summer, they went through the process. We went through the process of walking through all of the income areas and all of the expense areas. And the first thing that they said was, you have a lot more expenses than you have income. And so asked the staff to go back and to take a look at everything that was there. And the staff worked hard to cut $250,000 from the budget. I will admit that some of those things were things we had budgeted that we had not fulfilled in many years. They were staff positions and they were sort of dreams of programming. But that was sort of the first round. And the second piece that I will say was part of the initial budgeting, but that actually happened after that, was really making sure once we had cut anything that sort of felt extraneous or was making sure that we were also meeting all of the priorities that Bishop Clark has laid out for the diocese. She's done that in a couple of emails. Well, I guess they've come to us as emails, a couple of letters that she's written both at her 6 months and at her 1-year anniversary of being our bishop, and has very clearly sort of stated the things that she is really hoping for some focus on. And so I'm going to name them for you here. I apologize that I don't have a slide, but supporting and retaining clergy, revitalizing the diaconate, supporting congregations in crisis, connecting congregations to help foster collaboration. Those are some of those first set of priorities of what she really wants the work of the bishop's office, the diocese, to be. And then with those, to focus on financial viability, violence prevention, equity and equality, hunger, and creation care. And as we look through the budget, you'll see that all of those things are reflected there. And so really trying to focus the budget this year on those priorities that she has, to retool what had been a budget that we had sort of copy and pasted for a number of years as our diocese was in transition, and to be able to take her leadership and to move forward. And along with that, she also this summer, obviously those staff members in the room know well, but others may remember that she also did a reorganization of the bishop's staff. And that primarily, involved some title shifting, some of the ways that we organize the budget. You'll notice some of our categories remain the same, but some changed. And some of that staffing change really went to focus on some of the things that she has named as priorities, having a canon to the ordinary, having a canon for ministries and networking for administration, that those were really, trying to meet the needs of our diocese. And so the last piece of making sure that this budget was going to help carry us into 2024 was making sure that those that we were also, it was reflecting this reorganization, which was a little bit of a switch at the end, making sure that it, met all those needs. But we did that piece. And at the end, if you've looked at the materials, you'll note that, we came up with a budget that has a $1 million deficit. And that is, I think, hard to say. And the budget committee was really committed to making sure that it was said, and that we said it loud, and that we noted that we are proposing a deficit budget to be approved. And that deficit budget reflects, the needs and the reality of what our income is. And so with that, they wanted to make sure that we were being, that we were covering that deficit, that we were going to find a way to make sure that it was funded. And so the 3 funding sources for that deficit are the bishop funds, which are discretionary funds that the bishop has access to, the trustees of the endowment who agreed to an extraordinary grant above the funds that are already being taken from the endowment fund, just to help get us over this hump for 2024, as well as the bishop and trustees, who also, heard the request to help support this budget, and so responded to that positively with an additional $250,000 to help support that that deficit. And so, although it was a deficit budget that was proposed, it is one that we do have the resources to fund. But the more that we chip away at those resources, the fewer years we'll be able to do this, right? And so the hope going forward is this hope that at some point we will sell the building at 65 East Huron, that the proceeds from that building will, one, be able to create an endowment-like fund that will help support this budget, the diocesan budget, as well as being able to relieve some of the stress of having to support the full building that the bishop's staff are not fully using. So when that happens, there is no timeline, and so when it comes to fruition, that is sort of our goal. But the longer that process takes, obviously, the more questions we'll have to struggle with in the coming years. But that is my general overview, and that is probably a lot more than you needed to hear me say in one go. But I wanted to start us there. And then I wanted to invite, if I believe there's a few in the room, if there's anyone who is on the budget committee that wanted to just offer any of their experience with serving on that committee, or I don't know if Crystal or Keith, either of you want to say anything about that experience, but I would invite that now.
I would just say that I was happy for the representation that we got from, the different governing bodies, and then, also having an at-large member from the Peoria Deanery who also participated in the process. It just felt good to have, a broader perspective on what we were doing. And they were, I thought, really good in that they gave us really frank feedback and challenged us in a way that I don't think, we've been previously challenged in terms of going back and revisiting our expenses. So I will say that I felt like the process was effective, in that way. And it also gave members of those governing bodies to cascade the draft budgets within their organizations. So we didn't come up with surprises or, a completed budget that they just didn't have input into. So, and I'm grateful for everybody for accepting the challenge, because 5 meetings over the summer isn't anybody's favorite thing to do.
So last year, Bishop and trustees and the council were asked to sign off on the budget, and Bishop Clark had just been consecrated, and they said, we've got to change this next year. We need to be more involved now that Bishop Clark is on board. And so we got marching orders really a year ago from Bishop and trustees and the council, and they had members in the process, has been mentioned, but I think the proposed budget went to, before it was proposed, it went to the committee to sign off on, and then it came to the bishop and trustees, and then the council, and they asked a lot of questions, about exactly what the expenses were for, and how the support was coming from, and how much money we've got to support this. If the building isn't sold, how long is that going to run? At this rate, we told them about 5 years, and so they asked some really hard questions. And Bishop and trustees, as Rebecca mentioned, got on board and signed off on this. And then we went to the trustees of the endowment, and they asked, one of their meetings, they asked some really hard questions too, and went into exactly what was going on. And so I just wanted to add that to what Rebecca said.
Thank you, Keith. I got a question too, directly in the chat, sort of talking about what, well, this is actually, what is the likelihood of closing on the building in 2024, and what happens if that sale falls through? And I can't speak to the likelihood of the sale happening or the timeline, but I can state that, you know, what we're looking at right now with our budget is that the Bishop funds, which is our primary source of additional funding, which for the past number of years, we have always budgeted to cover this deficit. I should be clear that having a deficit budget is nothing new. It's just that for many years within the budget, we just had a very large unsustainable draw from the Bishop funds, right? And so this year we wanted to point to the fact that you know, that is unsustainable, and it's, you know, extra for us to have to cover this deficit that way. But we'll be spending about $500,000 of those funds, of which we have about $5.5 million in 2024. And so, you know, if we don't sell the building and if nothing changes with the budget, we've got a couple more years, right, before we really hit an edge. And I think obviously, you know, I think the Bishop staff would say we run on a relatively lean budget. We run with a relatively lean staff. I know we were dreaming in the lunchroom the other day of all the other positions that we would love to have if we had the resources, right? So, you know, it doesn't mean I don't see us hitting a cliff. I see us having to take some really drastic cuts, right, if nothing changes in the next couple of years. We've really tried to hold off on that. And tried to provide our new bishop with a budget that allows for the work of the bishop, the work of the diocese to continue. That was a decision made even during earlier, before we had even elected Bishop Clark. There was a decision to try to keep those resources the same, to use our investments to be able to sustain you know, the programs that we provide, the staffing that we have that help to respond to those congregations in crisis, those clergy in needing of assistance, right? And so, you know, that is why we've maintained the expenses the way that they are. The problem is that our income is decreasing. You know, a significant portion, half of our income, comes from congregations. It used to be a much higher percentage, and it used to be a much larger dollar amount. And so, you know, we're seeing that number decrease every year, and we're seeing, same as all congregations, we're seeing fixed costs continue to go up every year. And so, you know, it makes for a difficult you know, decision to make, but we are trying our best to you know, to weather those changes and to make some good decisions about the resources we do have, including 65 East Huron. Just looking through the chat to see if there was anything else directly, but I will, I'm going to share my screen if I can do that. And draw us to the budget summary. Oh, sorry, friends. And so this is page 2. As I zoom out, you can see this is page 2 of the budget as approved. And it's a summary document that I think is helpful to be able to see, you know, so some of the overarching income and expenses that we have. And I want to draw our attention to just a few things tonight and see if that sparks any additional conversation, and then we can just have some time for conversation. But so as I noted, you'll see you know, congregational pledges is sort of top of our income, and that makes up about half of the budget, the working budget. Aside from that, you'll see, and this, we're looking at this orange 2024 column. We have income from the bishop funds, and that's what we've budgeted is the actual income, is not dipping into the principal of those investments. The bishop's appeal is, you know, the fundraising dollars that we have budgeted that we receive from individual donors, trustees of the endowment. both the general fund and the fund for the episcopacy provide us with income. We have some income that comes from the building use from our partners at Episcopal Charities and St. James Cathedral. And then there's all the income that comes from programs, and that's everything from diocesan convention and summer camp and clergy conference, all of those things that all the programs that we run that have income. You'll note below, we've also noted other support and revenue. These are, funds that come in that either are passed through, maybe to our companion diocese, or to, we have funds that come in from the bishop and trustees that go as a way of supporting the vitality grants and support to mission congregations, building support, things like that. And then the Clergy Relief Society, which funds grants for clergy who are retired or their widows who are in need of special assistance. And so that is where we sort of get the full contribution and support value in this budget. Are there any sort of overarching questions on the income side? Could take those now, and I'm not in a way that I could see them very well. And then I'll scroll down quickly to expenditures. Ooh. And we, all of our, we have these sort of our different areas within the bishop's staff that are overarching, and you'll note, the episcopacy, which now also holds the compensation for our canon to the ordinary, is the largest of these areas. And it is, the bishop and the canon to the ordinary, the bishop's executive assistant, and the chaplain who's on our call, and the programming that happens sort of directly out of that office, so visitations and confirmations and those sorts of things. The ministry's budget, which is below, includes a lot of our programming efforts, right? So CCD and camp and the youth programming or Fresh Start. All of those programs fall into ministries along with the staff that are a part of those efforts. Networking houses all of our communications. For this year, we broke out the development area because there is an effort underway to hire a development officer who will hopefully help to make a dent in that income number, right, to add to our resources. And we have long been without one, and I know there's a few people on this call who'd be happy to see someone who can put some more effort toward that and help us to connect with our donors in a new way. And so, but networking also, I should draw our attention, does a lot of the work with our commissions and committees. And so that's, the Hunger Committee and the Anti-Racism Commission, and a lot of that outreach work that Bishop Paula has prioritized is found in that budget. So violence prevention work, creation care, there's a new creation care funding in that budget. And so that's a way that we do a lot of our outreach. Administration and finance is the staff like Anna Stefaniak, who many of you have probably worked with in human resources. And then, the finance team and everything that it takes to sort of keep the office going, along with that St. James Commons number, which is specific, our expenses specifically related to the running of the St. James Commons, the 65 East Huron facility. You'll see those pass-through funds listed below. And then that is our total expenditure number at the bottom. And so we're looking at, that $1 million difference between what we see coming in and what we anticipate going out to be funded by the entities here and the extraordinary grants that they have provided us for this year. I wonder if there are any questions that are looming in the room, whether they're, specific directions or just sort of broad general questions, anything that people are wondering about in the budget. Let me stop this so that I can see folks better. I'm seeing some good comments in the chat about how do we change, the way that we do things. Should we rethink our operations? And that is, I think, one of the things that was considered when we put the 65 East building up for sale, right? Was how can we do things differently? We've always had this building downtown. Do we need that? Is there a different way? And I think we would all say that we are continuing to live into the new direction that we have from Bishop Clark, and how that, how can we do that work differently? This episcopacy is by her presence going to look different, right? And so the joy that brings into seeing her vision for what is important, her focus on, congregation vitality, and that the health in those connections that she's making. Let's see, there are not many cuts rejected. Yep, so then the question too of if there are not many reductions in the budget, does the hope rest on the sale of the building? Yes, if we are going to continue in the way that we have projected, that we are hoping to go, that is a big place of where our hope rests. But and I don't know if someone else wants to jump in to speak to that, but that is, that is right now our big hope. And until we know that is not going to come to fruition, which we have every anticipation that it is, and every indication that those conversations are still happening. Until we know that isn't, I think that is where we are focusing, because we know, we cut what we could. There isn't a whole lot of extra in the budget. And so I think most staff would say that at this point, to be able to continue to provide the resourcing to congregations and to clergy that we are, to be able to provide the few programs that we do, we need to. There are some cuts, like we will not be having an in-person convention next year because that is a very significant expense. And so that's, one of the ways, but there are also every year, next year is also a general convention year. And so we will be sending a deputation to the general convention. And so, there are things that we are required to do that we have to maintain. Maintaining, one of the things, having the endowment for the episcopacy is really is a wonderful gift, because the work of the episcopacy, needs to continue. And so we're grateful for those resources that have become available in the past couple of years. But yes, we continue to try to find new ways. So one of the questions that I just got in the chat was, where does Bishop and Trustees get its funding? And then Kathleen, I'll jump to you. So Bishop and Trustees also has investments. Most of those investments have been funded over the years by the sale of closed properties. And so Keith can speak to that maybe a little more. I noticed him go off mute. Go ahead.
Yes, they've built an endowment, or it's an endowment-like investment that's very similar to the endowment investment of the trustees of the endowment, as well as the Bishop Funds. All three of those entities. Bishop Funds has about $5.5 million. Trustees of the endowment have somewhere around $6 to $7 million, and Bishop and Trustees has the same type of endowment-like investment. And the dividends from that, or the income from that, is what they use, what Bishop and trustees uses to support its programs.
Right, the vitality grants to congregations and mission and ministry mission building capital support, and other bishop and trustees grants to help support the infrastructure of the diocese. Kathleen, what's your question?
5 years seems like a very short period of time in a financial life. And as we see more and more parishes struggling financially, and as you noted, increase in costs for maintaining buildings and structure, what happens if a diocese is no longer financially solvent? What happens? What is the plan if the building doesn't sell and the development process isn't able to manifest?
That's a great question that I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer, but I can just state that it is something that we think about often, but I can't say that we have put a full task force behind to do an outlook, right? To really determine if things don't change, what is the point? We have continued to push that hard decision making, right? We've continued to push it year over year. And I will say, it trips off my tongue to say be it luck, but I think, the Holy Spirit has moved in incredible ways in this diocese. And I've been on staff for a number of years, and we have talked about this for a number of years, and somehow that year just keeps moving. When that real edge keeps moving farther down the line. And so there are some deep conversations that we need to have, right? We need to talk about, our common mission share, and that number keeps decreasing. What does that mean for our congregations, and what does it mean for our diocese? We need to talk about how we're using these investments. But it's hard to do when we don't even currently have the staffing that we need to be able to do the work that we're doing. And so I think it's been a conversation about, trying to equip our bishop with all the resources that she can have, so that she can have that conversation and really be able to help us determine where are we going from here. And so 1 year under her belt, she really had a hand in building this budget and trying to get us to a place where, we felt like we were making some cuts and we were continuing to do some of the work. But the hope is, bringing in a development officer will help us to see where there may be some greater opportunity. And then continuing to hope and pray that the sale of the building does come to fruition, and that we can, better dream about how we can use those resources, and what the future looks like, what those funds will look like. But there is a real question. We have continued to sort of pass this down the line, and we haven't yet really looked at, if we were to make the decision today to make some serious changes, what that would look like and what those cuts would have to be. Annie?
Yeah, the Chicago population's stable. The number of people who are attending mainline Protestant churches is dropping dramatically. There's no growth, no positive growth, the way we do things now. So it seems to me like, regardless of what happens with the building, we're going to be in this exact same place in a year or 2 or 3. And we either have to make significant changes in the way we operate, or we have to do some significant evangelization to a population that's very frustrated, and I think rightly so, by a lot of religious organizations. And I don't see, I really want to see some evidence that there's big changes. We can't cut our way to break even with this kind of budget. I mean, things have to change in a big way. And this is what, the second, third, how many deficit budgets we've had? That makes me really nervous, really nervous. So, yeah. I don't know.
So Annie, we started running deficit budgets in 2013. And we've drawn out of Bishop funds $5 million already from 2013 till now. And the thing that helped us out was we put out of Bishop funds, we put $2 million into the plaza, for example. So we began to project, or we were projecting in about 2018, we were projecting that we would be 5 years from it running out of Bishop funds in 2018. And that prompted, I believe, Bishop Lee to say that we needed to sell the building because we were seeing, you know, the effects of, and let's back up a little bit. In 2007, 2008, our common mission share pledges were about $3.2 million. And the staff was brought on to accommodate that kind of growth in income. And shortly after that, with the recession in 08, 09, or 08, 09, right in there, our budget turned around, started going down, and we started even in the early 2010s, 2013, about thereabouts, the deficit started hitting. So the projection right now is to go to 2008, 2009. I mean, 2028, 2029. So there's $1 million projected to come in from a trust in 2027. So we're not being threatened in a 2 or 3 year time period. Based on the numbers I hear that B&T talks about and the time frame that they're talking about, there should be a sale of the property well before that. So I think when you take, and I can't talk about numbers here but the numbers that I'm hearing, if we get, I think the minimum amount that they're talking about, it would cover today's budget with the dividend from that. Plus, if we move out of our building, we take a lot of this money out because there's some compensation in the admin and finance area that covers compensation. So between the increased income and the increased endowment, there should be enough to cover what we're talking about in this budget. I don't know about new programs. You heard the hope that there will be new programs and other additions to the staff, but we'll have to see. We're holding that in abeyance, right, Rebecca?
Exactly. I mean, we always hope and dream, right? All organizations do. But yeah, I mean, you are absolutely correct. Like these are hard questions, and these are, and I think right now it feels easiest to focus on the thing that's been set in front of us as a possibility, right? But as someone else pointed out, I mean, that won't last forever, right? And so, you know, we hope, and I appreciate Annie serves on our the foundation board, and so there, you know, we hope that these endowments and the investments that we have will continue to you know, provide some income, right? But not only if we don't continue to spend them down.
The other thing that I'll mention, we did this projection of the estimated actual in 2023. The expenses are not at the level that we had projected at the start of this budget or early on in the budget. I don't know that we're going to pull $700,000 out of bishop funds. If we pull anything, it'll probably be in the magnitude of $200,000. So that's a bit of good news. Plus, we haven't pulled any money out in 2021 or 2022 from the bishop funds. That served to help not draw those monies out of bishop funds. So as Rebecca is saying, Annie, this budget is or the future is not as accurate as we have been projecting.
Wonder if there are any other questions or comments or thoughts, or anyone who would like to raise their hand to be part of the budget committee next year and be part of these hard conversations, or maybe the committee we need to start, which is the, you know, how could we live into a new reality? What could that, you know, look like? But, you know, truly, it is only by, you know, the volunteers that have, you know, really stepped forward and lend, you know, their voice that we can hear from the diocese, from those of you, you know, doing this work out in your congregations about, you know, what is important, where are the places where we need to be, you know, focusing our efforts. What are the things that we could let go of? It's hard to envision, you know, doing less of any of the things that, you know, that are done, you know, the support that goes out. And so I appreciate all of your comments and feedback and questions and challenges, right? That's good for us. Yes, Kathleen.
You know, just one last comment. It seems ironic to me that the youth and family support been cut to half time, when I know we're all trying to reach out to young families and children and rebuild the church back up from youth. And I know the challenges there, but that's a cut in the budget that seems counterintuitive to me. And so I'm just wondering what's the thinking on that, and what is the thinking in terms of building resources, or is it really just grants and estates and all that kind of development sort of thing?
Thank you, Kathleen. I will, Sierra, would you mind responding to that?
Kathleen, thank you so much for bringing that up. I think it is, I see the logic of it for sure. From what I have understood as far as the history of how our budgets have been created within the diocese, is that there has been a focus on youth programming being on a parish level and not so much programming on a diocesan level. And so those have been intentional decisions made in previous years. And so that's why on the diocesan level, that area has been significantly cut, and it continues to be sort of made smaller and smaller. And I think that some real, it would require a change in order for that that line item to have a larger slice of the pie. But every ministry is making the case that they need a larger slice of a very finite size of pie, you know. But I will also say that in many ways, a conversation around how we organize ourselves is also in order, because it's now at a point where our canons and the way our budget is aligned, such as having youth delegates to convention, but without a programming for a youth minister, it's hard for us to even fulfill our canons. And so a sort of a conversation around how we do church, I think, is definitely in order.
Thank you for pointing that out, Kathleen, and for responding, Sierra. Anything else? Other questions? Yeah.
I guess I just want to put some context in the fact that the conversation that we're having is also being had in 100, I don't know how many dioceses we've had within the church now, because we've had some consolidation and reunifications within our church, but over 100 dioceses we have in the Episcopal Church, and each of them are having these conversations. And many of them do not have the blessing of bishop and trustees and endowment funds in order to have these special grants. So I think we first need to really recognize the blessing that these bodies have been giving, so to allow us to continue to do church for as long as we are doing church. And I wonder what wisdom there could be, just as we wish for cross-congregational input, also cross-diocesan input as well, because we're all having to answer these same questions. And many dioceses are doing all sorts of things in order to meet the needs of their people. And so things like Province 5, bishops coming together, and other sort of para-diocesan bodies, I'm really interested in just sort of how each of us are trying to answer these hard questions.
Thank you, Sarah. Jenny, do you have a question for us?
Yeah, hi, Jenny Hewlin, rector at St. Simon's in Arlington Heights. Not a question, but just want to thank you. It's sort of, for the last 3 years, we have been talking at St. Simon's about how the church's current and historic model of funding its ministry is unsustainable, and trying to think creatively about how we are going to approach our life as a congregation. And it's sort of paradoxically comforting for me to hear the rest of the body wrestling at the diocesan level with the very same questions. And so just a word of gratitude to you for your leadership, a word of hope to all of us, just because this model, in my opinion, is fading away and isn't going to last. I really appreciate some of the comments about, yeah, well, we can, get through for another couple of years, but really we just got to change some stuff. And so just want to shout out with love to the diocesan staff, to our bishop, and to all of us who are going to wrangle something out of this. I don't know what, but there we are. So love to you all and gratitude. That's it.
Thank you so much. I may take this opportunity just to shout out the folks that served on the budget committee, to say a special thank you to them, which is David Ark, Pat Cornelius Woods, Don Fry, Mark Kelly, Wes Kimes, Brad Lindboom, and Debbie Rakestraw. If any of those are folks that you know, I invite you to pass on that message, to say thank you, because they have been challenging us and asking these hard questions as well. And so I want to say thank you to them. But yeah, there was a lot that went into putting this budget together, but that doesn't mean that we answered all the questions or is very clear. And so I appreciate the thoughts. And obviously, we've got 2024 has been approved and is moving forward and will be presented at convention. But I really am serious about if there are folks in this room that would want to help out in the coming, next year for 2025. And or if you have additional thoughts that you'd want to drop into an email, or if you'd want to give myself or Keith Camper or any of the other bishop staff a call, we would always be happy, to take that, because it will take all of us. This is, as Jenny mentioned and Sierra mentioned, this is not just us, this is happening everywhere. And so the more wisdom and ideas we get behind and how we can live our life differently, the better the chance that we will, be able to confront this challenge, with the resources we need and our wits about us. So thank you. Is there anything else burning in the room folks would like to offer? If not, I'm gonna ask if we can close in prayer. Gracious and loving God, thank you for bringing us together this evening. Thank you for all the hands that went into crafting this budget and for the time that was spent in really listening to the needs, priorities of the diocese. I ask that as we go forward from this place, that you would strengthen us and encourage us, and that your Spirit would help us to be creative as we think about what our life looks like together in the next year, in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, so that we may better do your work in the world. Thank you for all those who join us tonight, for their wisdom, for their challenges. I ask that you be with all of us as we head off back to our lives, that we may rest in your peace, and rise tomorrow with strength to carry out your work in the world. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
So thank you again for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you, Crystal and Sierra and Jen for running this meeting.
Jen, Rebecca.
Thank you, Topacio, for being here to interpret.
Yes, Topacio.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good to see
Good
you.
night.